Masithandaze. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interest of the people of this province. Almachtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons nodige wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikilela Nkosi ilizwe lethu nabantu balo. Umisele ukulunga kweliphondo lethu. Nkosi sikelela iAfrika. Gcina abantwana bayo. Khokhela inkokheli zayo. Yinike uxolo Nkosi iAfrika. All this we beg in the most holy name. Amen. You may be seated. Mr. Secretary.
Repliek van die premier op die debat oor die premiersrede.
Thank you. Baie dankie, meneer de Secretary. I recognize the Premier.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And Speaker, it's a privilege to be able to stand here today and reply to the debate. And so I'd first like to say thank you very much to each and every one of the members of this House that took time and energy to prepare their speeches, to bring their issues to this House, this sixth Parliament of the province of the Western Cape. Specifically, I'd like to talk to those members who made their maiden speeches. Some of them an absolute maiden speech because it's the first time that they'd spoken in this House. Others who'd made maiden speeches, who'd made speeches before in this House but were here under a different party banner or guise. But every single one of those maiden speeches, I want to congratulate them. And when I was thinking about maiden speeches, it made me think about my own maiden speech in this House. And I made it from that bench where the Honourable Gillian is sitting right now, 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, of a speech made in a House that really talks to democracy in our country. Because in this very House, I might have come here as part of a coalition government. I then went into opposition. I then came back into government. And so, in my 20 years, was a process within the Parliament of this province that really shows that democracy can work. But what I want to say in this point is what I heard in these speeches is how do we work in this House with our different responsibilities that the voters have given us and our parties have given us? How do we work in this House with those responsibilities in making sure that we make a difference in the lives of the people in this province that we represent, in whichever space we find ourselves? And I really want to say that within the context of how I started off this debate about vision, about responsibility, about values, about safety. That's what a State of the Province address is about. It is about putting that vision on the table and then utilizing this very august House to put other issues and counter issues on the table so that we can make sure that this House adds value to our citizens. And so, of course, what I started off with in my maiden SOPA in this sixth Parliament was one of a vision where in a province, people can live free from fear. A vision where hard work and dedication can bring us and individuals success in this province. This is to do with economic growth and opportunity, a vision where our children can grow up healthy and are prepared for tomorrow's economy, a vision in which a province where life has value no matter where you live or work. You have the option to use safe public transport. You have the option to make decisions and use your own responsibility given to you within the constitution of our country to make decisions on where you live and where you work and how you move around our province. And also a vision where innovation and a cultural change within an organization is a space where a province can embrace new ideas and always do the right thing based on those values, based on the responsibility that those values and this opportunity has given us, and making sure that whatever we do is aligning to make this province a safer province. And so again, I would like to say that as we enter the start of the 6th Parliament in this province, and I really do take on board the issues that have been raised by the individual members. I'm not going to reply to every single person, but I have picked out issues that perhaps need a reply, or issues that maybe need to be fleshed out, or even issues where within this framework we take those suggestions and we move forward with them within a government and within a parliament. So first of all, thank you very much to the Leader of the Opposition in taking part in this debate, in putting the issues on the table. And I think the first thing that I would like to address is where he said, and he called on me, and I quote, "Bring to order those who seek to discredit potential candidates who may have a history within the liberation movement," close quotes. And what the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is talking about is he is talking about the safety component and the responsibility that we all have in making sure that we make this province safer. And he's talking about the process now in giving us a new provincial police commissioner. I want to assure him that what we really need in this province is a dedicated police professional, irrespective of his past credentials or where he comes from. A police commissioner whose interest it is to break down the divisions that we see at the moment, those factions in the top management of our province that are actually not enabling leadership to give the rest of the police team in this province to play their part, their responsibility, their constitutional mandate in actually making sure this is a safer province. And I can assure you that that's exactly what we will do. We need to make sure, we will make sure that as a competent state, it is our responsibility to appoint the best person for the job. And I've just heard the interjection from the Leader of the Opposition, and I'll ask him to raise it whenever one of our DA members make a counter proposal or come in with those kind of sidelines, and I will deal with it. But then I also ask him to take responsibility to do exactly the same thing when we see the opposite happening from another political faction, trying to push one of the factions into a leadership process. We will do that, and that's the kind of responsibility that we are asking of members of this House, to play their role according to our own values in moving this province forward. I also want to say that, but perhaps I think I'll leave it there. I think that it is each of our responsibilities to make sure that we move away from emphasizing those factional fights, because that does not help the individual person in this province whose life is in danger, who is put under pressure when trying to get their kids to school because it is unsafe to do so. And I think that that is the first promise coming out of this interaction in this debate. But I want to say the second point, as raised, not only in his speech, but also in an interjection in the debate, was one of when we spoke about the deployment of the military under the police in making this province safer, and we all welcome it, and I heard it from across the House that we welcome this. But of course, this is just giving us a little bit of cover, bringing some stability. I think we all understand that. What happens now? What are we going to be doing differently to create a different environment so the people of this province can be safer? And I've committed, and you were there, and other members were there when we had the summit on safety in this province. And I didn't stand up on the stage and pick a fight. I didn't stand up and talk about resourcing. I didn't stand up and talk about any of those things. I stood up and said, I welcome this discussion. I welcome this two-day event where we really get together to talk about outcomes in creating a safer environment. And I pledged to the Minister that we will make sure that every department in this province plays its role in making a difference in society in this province. I pledged that. But the point that I'm getting to is that then I get asked, well, then drop the intergovernmental dispute. I'm going to say categorically now, and I said it to the Minister and I said it to the President, we will not just drop the intergovernmental dispute. Because an intergovernmental dispute is how a province uses their responsibility in making sure that we will push any boundary that is out there to make sure it's safer for our province. And we will use that dispute and keep it in place until we start to see a difference, until we start to see a measured difference in the safety of this province. But when the Honourable Leader of the Opposition made that interjection, I went straight back to him and said to him, what would be really nice is an official answer to the numerous letters we've sent along legal lines in line with this intergovernmental dispute. Just saying we've received it and we accept that we will look at these following, we need that response. We ask for that response because that is also a process. And without that happening, we can have imbizos and we can have meetings and we can bring in the military, but we will continue in our oversight role of the police in this province to use every single lever that we have possible in making sure that this province is safer. So that will stay in place until we are satisfied that we are really getting some good traction in partnership with national, provincial and local in making this a safer province.
Would you like me to interject a response?
No.
Honorable Dagmo, you had
But
the
the Honourable
opportunity,
Dagmo,
remember.
in his speech also raised a couple of other things that I must comment on. And I want to raise this in the context of a vision with values, with responsibility, making sure that we all play our role. And here, I do really value the position brought to this House of we're going to do things differently. As an opposition, we want to be constructive, which is the spirit in which we've started off this term. I want to say to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I value that approach. I value that we also can have meetings with each other to make sure that this province is better. But then I want to say to the Leader of the Opposition, when it comes to the issues raised around the Child Commissioner and the Environmental Commissioner, we must also be responsible in the way we raise these things in the House. And so let's talk about the Child Commissioner first. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition knows that this has been a long process of ANC government and DA government. And in the last term, we finalised the Child Commissioner. We actually signed it into law. And as the chair of the Standing Committee said, this Standing Committee now has the responsibility to take the Child Commissioner forward. What the Standing Committee has to do is they have to make sure that they now advertise for nominations. They have to make sure that they publish the names of those members of the public, of those members that have made or been submitted, so that members of the public can actually vet and have a look and comment on those names. They have to make sure that they consider then those nominations and call in selected nominees for interviews. They will then draw up a short list of candidates. The provincial parliament will agree on those short lists of candidates, and the parliament will then submit that list to me, for which I will then have 14 days in which to nominate the Child Commissioner in this province. So we can't stand up and raise issues here as if it has not been looked at, because the honourable member knows, and that's what I'm asking about. Please, we don't need to raise these issues in a way that is casting aspersions as if the work hasn't even been done. And so that brings me to the next. That brings me to the next
Honourable
point.
members, order.
And the next point, which the honourable member raised, which is the Environmental Commissioner. Now here, again, values, why we're bringing it here. And in actual fact, if you really wanted to bring the Environmental Commissioner back here, it would come via a substantive motion to say that what we should do is relook at it. Because that's how you bring it back here. You don't bring it back here in comments as if you're making a political rhetoric about an Environmental Commissioner when the honourable member knows, because he served in a cabinet in this government in 2005 to 2009. And I read from a document submitted to Cabinet. This is a document by Minister T. Esop on the 7th of December 2005. The Premier, permission to suspend the establishment of the Office of the Commissioner of the Environment. I'm not going to read the whole document, but perhaps the key part of this document, well it could be a last end of the first background, which says the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, as well as the legislative milieu, has led to a rethinking of the need of a role and the function of a provincial commission on the environment. And without going into full detail, I'll give the Leader of the Opposition this document if he would like, but the legislative changes that have made since, we'll come to that, the legislative changes that have made since the Constitution was drawn up and this date when the ANC were in government, said the National Environment Management Act, the Air Quality Act, the Protected Areas Act, the Biodiversity Act, the Amendment Act to NEMA, and the Water Act.
Order, honourable members. Order, honourable members. Premier, will you please take a seat? Honourable members, we understand the temperature from time to time might rise and the excitement, but I would like to request in the most honourable way that we afford the Honourable Premier to proceed, hoping that he did the same to us on both sides, because we debated and he was listening. So he must now respond. If we don't allow him to, we'll never know what he thinks of what we may have or may have not said. May we allow him the opportunity, please. Honourable Premier.
So these were the reasons that the ANC submitted to Cabinet in 2005. We also know that last year, the ANC Youth League took the previous Premier, to court on this specific issue as an urgent application. This was dismissed with costs. We also know that the Honourable Dugmore was part of a committee who unanimously agreed in February this year to let the amendments of the Constitution around this matter stand over to the 6th Parliament. So what I'm asking is that if this is an issue that I heard from the interjection, there is a rethink on it, well then there's ways to submit these things back to Parliament that we can have proper debate and discussion on them. And that's what I would like to put to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. That in actual fact, I think we agree to exactly where the environment is on the environment, and that is that we have sufficient legislation, oversight we actually have first world legislation in the management of our environment. And I think putting another layer really does not help us from achieving the economic goals that we need to achieve, not only in our province, but in our country. We have the highest youth unemployment rate in the world. We have high unemployment rates. We have slow growth in the economy. And what we should be doing is putting our energy into looking at ways where we need to protect the environment, but also in ways in which we can speed up economic opportunity. We can speed up an environment that actually gives opportunity to our people to open businesses, to create jobs, to find jobs. And that's what we need to be looking at, how we create that balance. So I really look forward to this next 5 years in how we utilize this space not to bring these kind of issues, but let's put real substantive stuff on the table that really takes us to another level in this province. We need to use those opportunities. Then I would like to say in closing, that on the Leader of the Opposition, that we know that if we have a look at the agreement that we have already as the Leader of the Opposition and the Premier, I think if we have a look at what the Speaker has put in place, which is a new iteration of how Parliament operates with its leadership, political leadership, where we have quarterly meetings where we come together, where we really start to put these issues on the table so that we can then come to this House and have proper debates. Because it was one of the issues that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and I spoke about, is we also need to make sure that the citizens of this province can see value coming out of this House. And so on that point, I really once again would like to say to him, thank you very much for the attitude that he has brought, and we could see it in much of the debate that was happening in this first debate happening in this 6th Parliament. And I really look forward to seeing how these things come about. So on that point, and the last issue that was raised by the Leader of the Opposition was one of how do we use, and this was in the discussion around land, around housing, the big debate that's happening at the moment, specifically in land availability in inner cities or in our towns. And of course, I will commit now to this House that where the province is involved, and along with the minister responsible or the ministers responsible, that we will commit to unlocking wherever we can the blockages at the moment and push as hard as we can. For instance, Tafelberg or Helen Bowden. And so these spaces that are blocked up, we will really push to it. But what I also want to do is say, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition raised an issue in this House, which was one of, why aren't we using our school properties to build on the periphery, housing opportunities for our teachers? It creates a safe environment. It makes really good sense. And I want to say to him, thank you for bringing that to this House. I want to commit to him and with him to say, I really, really want to work together on how do we find one of these to work. It's not new. Professor Edgar Petersen has spent a lot of time talking about this. In actual fact, he has a presentation that he made to our Bosberaad. We have actually, a few years ago, tried this, and the big blockage that we found was school governing bodies. Because it's actually school governing bodies that have to play a big role in making sure that we enable this. I had a discussion with the Minister of Education, and she's also in absolute agreement that if we can find a way that we can work together on this, as long as it doesn't detract from, we don't want to hand over too much space that you've got no more space for sporting activities or after-school activities. If we can find sufficient education and after-school space and use the rest for development, we will work together. So my challenge now to the Leader of the Opposition is, can I ask you to let's find one or two, and I'll hand that to you. Let's find one or two, bring it to us, and let's put a team together that says, let's go and find a way to actually make this happen. Let's go in the next year or two, let's go and find a way that we can actually get exactly what he has said on the table and happening. Let's make it happen. And I would like to do that together with the Leader of the Opposition. Obviously, we have to work out the nuts and bolts of how then opposition holds us to account in the delivery thereof, but let's find a way in actually making that work. Then moving on in the debate, and the Leader of the EFF in the House, the Honourable Taichel, thank you very much for your contribution. And really what I want to highlight out of your contribution is the issue that you raised around independent power producers versus Eskom. And obviously in your policy and the way you see the world, you see, and the way you put it was that independent power producers is white monopoly capital as opposed to Eskom. I want to say to you, sir, that we have a major problem in our country. A really big, big problem. And if we have to analyze the biggest problem right now, I would say it's Eskom. And the reason I say it's Eskom is because the rating agencies, the cost of our debt, the ability for a medium and long-term future in our economy, the difference between total collapse of our country and almost 100% surety of absolute flight of any capital and absolute zero option of any investment is if Eskom falls over and fails. If Eskom falls over, that we move to constant blackouts and even a major blackout across our country for months, we've finished as a country. We are finished. It will be anarchy, it will be horrendous, and it will take us 25 years to get out of that. So quite frankly, I will state it right now that we cannot afford for Eskom to fail. We cannot afford it in this province, and our country cannot afford it in this province. But we must understand that we have to find some alternatives. Members of this House raised issues about our constitutional mandate and what we can do and what we can't do. We can't just accept that. We've got to push boundaries further than we have any time ever before. And what I'm saying in this province is we have to build resilience. And that's where the independent power producers come in. And when we talk about independent power producers, the ideal independent power producer is a young black entrepreneur building a business and creating jobs and putting power into our grid. And that's way better than Eskom. That's way better than these CEOs have managed to do for us in South Africa over the last 10 years. In the last 10 years, 12 CEOs, 6 board chairs, and debt and risk, which is out of control. We've just bailed out Eskom once again, another 59 billion. And guess what? Do you know where that 59 billion comes from? We didn't borrow it. It comes from the poor. Because we have to find it within our own budgets across South Africa. Not just this province. Every province in South Africa and national government are cutting that money out of service delivery to the poor and giving it to Eskom, to these guys, to say, here's some more money. We almost don't know how to learn our lesson. So quite frankly, doing that, we have to do it because, as I said, we cannot afford for Eskom to fail. But at the same time, we better be making sure that we are resilient. And that's why we need independent power producers. We need to make sure that we are creating an opportunity future. That is our responsibility. Along with our values, we create those opportunities of investment, of opportunity for entrepreneurs so that we become resilient and we can actually change the lives of people in our province. So I disagree with you, sir. I disagree with you. We have to enable those entrepreneurs to give us that resilience. And again, we have to make sure that we move to a different space so the bailouts are not costing us classrooms or teachers or healthcare, HIV/AIDS medicines or chronic medicines or hip operations or any other kind of space in which this government creates an enabling environment and opportunities. We have to make sure that we push whatever boundary we can so that, and that's why we're in court on the IPPs, that's why we've got to make sure that we succeed, because that will build the resilience and hope for our young people moving into the future. Then, the issue was raised around the agricultural audits in this province. For the third year now, we will not be able to have a clean audit in agriculture. And that is put squarely on my desk, and I take full responsibility for that. Because I am the one that made the decision to say we will go to court on this issue. Now let's talk about that agricultural audit and what it actually means. And why in my speech I actually started to speak about the Auditor General, which is something that people generally looking at us saying, wow, what on earth is he doing? Taking on the Auditor General. Is he mad? Is this crazy? But let's talk about agriculture. If we talk about agriculture in 2010-11, clean audit. In 2012-13, clean audit. In 2013-14, clean audit. In 2014-15, clean audit. And in 2015-16, clean audit. A really proud track record of a department that works damn hard to make sure that they do things properly in the best interests of the people. Over and above that, they have received the awards, the following awards from the South African Institute for Government Auditors. In 2011, the Agricultural Department received the highest score in the annual Public Sector Reporting Awards. In 2011, it was the overall winner for provincial and national departments. In 2012, the department received both the highest score and the overall winning accolade again. In 2015, it received recognition for the highest score and the most consistent highest scores for 2013, 14, and 15. But what happened in agriculture is the Auditor General and National Treasury started looking at how to change the rules. And they're changing the rules in the interest of curbing corruption. But what happens in provinces where, when you get to that space, we don't have an Estina dairy that we've got to create a space in which we must stop transfers. We don't have that. We don't have that. And so this, I will tell you straight, this is the risk. If we win this court case, what is that going to mean? Yeah, sure. That's why we take it to the courts, and we abide with the outcome of the courts. But if we win this court case, what is it going to mean for the Estina dairy? But what we must say is that at the moment, what they are asking us to do is to put out to tender how we operate between a body like Hortgrow. A body like Hortgrow, which receives its funding from SARS. It's a statutory body that for every carton of fruit that we export to the rest of the world, a percentage goes to this organization to do what? To make sure we are globally competitive, to make sure we are growing that sector, and to make sure that we can create more jobs. And what this process is going to do is going to force us to say, if we lose, sorry, we can't partner with you anymore. It's true. It is true. And what I will say to this House, that yesterday again we met with the Auditor General, and we have agreed that within the next 100 days we will have this debate with the Auditor General, with National Treasury, with the National Auditor General, and ourselves. And I will actually see if I can bring in the Gauteng province as well into this discussion. Because it's in the interests of South Africa, our competitiveness and jobs. Because I will also make a last commitment while talking about this point, is that there is no ways that we will compromise on a brand of clean, effective, and efficient government. We are, and we have attained for years, the best outcome in South Africa every single year on our outcome. So we will not compromise on that. But we have to find ways in which this creep into our ability to deliver. It must change. Then the last point that I want to raise around this is, and around clean governance, and is the point that I raised in the debate about, at some stage we've got to make decisions that we are just going to do things, irrespective of the consequences. If we go through processes for 5 years, i.e. the Brandtvlei Dam, and we don't get anywhere, and we know that this is going to unlock 5,000 hectares for emerging black farmers to become commercial farmers, to play a role, as long as Hortgrow can still play their role in keeping us competitive globally. We spoke about that stuck in the mud, that clogged up space. We want clean, but we don't want clogged. But I must say that I raised this issue with the President. I raised this issue last week in this House, and I want to say to the National Department of Water Affairs, thank you very much. Because the announcement was made that this project is now going to start. They'll wait for the rainy season to end, and we will start this project by November this year. Thank you very much. That is really welcomed. Now that's exactly what we need to be doing. We need to be raising these issues. Let's unblock, let's unclog. We want to be clean, but we want to be unclogged and unblocked. and hopefully we can get this delivered very quickly, and it can make a major difference in the economy and for opportunities for people in our province. Speaker, I want to move to the Honourable Heron. The Honourable Heron says that we are powerless to deal with rail, we are powerless to deal with land, and we are powerless to deal with crime. Speaker, I do not accept that. I do not accept that. As a government, we need to be constantly looking for opportunities and using our influence to make life better for our people. My responsibility is to push the boundaries to ensure that we have better service delivery. My responsibility, this government's responsibility, is to find ways, in whichever way we need to do it, influence, push, do whatever we need to do so that we make the real difference. And so we are not powerless to do that. We will claim as much space as we can. We will make use of this Parliament to make life better. That is our responsibility. But I want to say to the Honourable Heron that he has vast experience in rail, in transport, in land. And I, as I've said to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, am really open to ideas on how we can change these things, on how we can make this province a better space. And I will be open, and my door is open, on saying, how do we actually change this? What should we be doing differently? Bring those issues to the table, and then, of course, your responsibility would be then, in your job, to keep us accountable and make sure that we are following through with these processes. Speaker, I want to move on to the Honourable Said. He raised some very interesting issues, and doing his job as oversight, the first one that he raised was the number of learners not placed in school. And of course, this is a very, very serious issue. It is an issue that we as a government take very, very seriously, and we know it's our responsibility to make sure that we fix these problems as he's raised. And I want to say to him again, absolutely open door. When we pick these things up, let's deal with them immediately, because it is unacceptable. Our responsibility, and within the vision of this province, is to make sure we create that opportunity for our young people so that they have the possibility of a life that they deserve, a life that they wish for and can see. So in this point, I want to say that he raised an issue around learners not in school. I've engaged with the Minister and engaged with the department, and yes, share his concern about learners not in school. And as we stand today, there are now 113 unplaced learners. These unplaced learners at the moment are busy. They're busy in the process of placing them. The issues around those unplaced learners are late applications and recent relocations. And of course, in his space in the Standing Committee to interact, but also, I think, not wait or delay for Standing Committee interactions. When you find someone in the street unplaced, let's speak about it immediately. Let's get that learner into a school as quickly as we can for full opportunity. But I want to say that we spoke about within our value statement, within this opportunity society, that it is not only the government that has that responsibility. There is also a responsibility for parents to make sure that their kids are in school. And I would really like us, as members of this Parliament, to work together in making sure that we get our young people into the spaces so that they have the opportunities of getting a good education, of making sure that they themselves have opportunities for the future. So let's also agree that wherever we are, when we see someone in the street not at school, we actually stop and we actually deal with that issue. It is all of our responsibility to make sure, because it is critical. It is critical for the issue around safety, because it is those very children that end up getting hooked into gangs, that end up getting hooked into all the wrong sides of society, and they end up in our jails. And that is not what we want. And so, at the same time, we will make sure that whatever you bring to us, we will try to place as quickly as possible because it is in the best interests of those young people. The next issue that I want to raise with you is the alcohol in schools. And first of all, I want to say to you that I went to go and have a look at how many schools thus far have used this new piece of legislation. Because, of course, remember, this legislation is an enabling piece of legislation. It is where a province looks at requests that come from schools and says, what are we going to do about these requests? And we create that enabling environment. But at the same time, when we talk about values and we talk about responsibility, there is a responsibility now given to a school governing body, to make a decision, to look at their policies. And so far, only 2 schools, since the legislation has come into being, only 2 schools have applied for a license in order for them, via their governing body, to utilize their facility to raise funds so that they can use those funds to help learners that perhaps cannot afford whatever they need to afford in attending that school, to perhaps add to the value add of that school. And of course, that is a decision that that school and that governing body can take. And again, I ask the honourable member to also show me any school that sells alcohol to anybody on their premises without following the process of going through their governing body and doing it when there are school learners on the property, and doing it when it is inside the school and not as a mechanism on a weekend of perhaps renting out their facility for a wedding or whatever they're doing in that facility in order to raise extra money to add to the value add of education in this province. That is why that component was put in that legislation. And let's not play politics with that. But if you find a serious transgression, bring it to us, take it to the police, take it to the licensing authority, and let's stop it. We will remove that right from that school. But we are giving an opportunity for a decision. And if you don't like the ability of a school to have liquor on that, make sure that that governing body writes in their policy that this will not happen. We will not give that allocation. We will not allow any fundraising opportunity to happen on this property. But
Order, honourable members. Order, honourable members.
Speaker, again,
Order, honourable members. May I please get an attention of the honourable members here? I've requested that we allow the Premier to respond. Thanks, Honourable Premier.
thank you very much, Speaker. It seems quite difficult to understand, but it is there and we need to use it. But let's actually ask the question, why? Why does the opposition bring up this piece of legislation time and time again? It's not about alcohol. It's not about alcohol. It is about the piece of legislation that says we will have monitoring and evaluation in our schools. That's actually why this opposition are bringing that up. And the question I ask myself is, why would an opposition want to even bring that up? Surely we want responsibility in our schools. Surely we want monitoring and evaluation in our schools. Surely we want to make our schools the best performing spaces for opportunity for our young people in this country, on this continent, or on this planet. We are rated in whatever rating you can think of, whether it's OECD, World Economic Forum, whomever it is, our education system is rated of the worst in the world. We have to make sure that South African education system starts playing around the space where Rwanda is playing, or even higher up the rankings. And how do you do that? You measure. If you can't measure, you cannot manage. And that's the real reason why the unions and the ANC don't like that piece of legislation. And so they want to fluff it around with responsibility allocated to them in this legislation to governing bodies on whether they can actually hire out their properties for fundraising to add value to their schools. And so, again, I commit to the honourable member that we deal with these issues decisively, but also, let's also think properly before we bring fluff to this parliament. Then, I want to speak to, again, the position around how do we bring issues to this parliament, that we take them seriously, that it doesn't matter who you are in this parliament, you must feel free to represent your voters, come with a great idea, just like the Honourable Leader of the Opposition brought to us, why aren't we building housing for teachers on extra land around our schools? Let's do that. The Honourable Mitchell brought an idea to this parliament in this debate. The idea was, why don't we create a depot so that when we have disasters, we can actually deliver goods, whether they be, or whatever they be, water in a drought, or clothing in a fire. Why don't we create a depot for disaster that we don't take collected goods from the public? Because that's one thing that the public in our country and in our province are really amazing at. When there's a disaster, people give of themselves unbelievably to help their fellow citizens in getting out of whatever that disaster is. As we stand here right now, there are many people in the city and around the city in this province who are in a difficult predicament because they've been flooded out. They have got wet clothing, they've maybe lost the roof of their home, whatever has happened, disaster. Now what happens is we create accounts, we go and look for help, etc., etc. Imagine if that depot was in place and we could deliver from that depot within hours. So the Honourable Mitchell, I think that is an excellent idea, because what you do is you actually, and we knew in the Knysna fires that we collected way too much. And the excess actually starts to build stock, so that you deliver immediately, and as you raise and as you bring in donated goods, you then replenish that stock, so you immediately reactive to that disaster. I think it's an outstanding idea, and exactly the same position as I have with the Honourable Dugmore. I think let's take that idea, and I speak to the Minister responsible for disaster management, and of course the Minister of Public Works, because between the two of them we need to go and find a facility, and I think it's an outstanding idea. Let's go and find that facility. Let's make it available as soon as we can, so that we can start to be much more responsive in our reactions. Members, I'm almost done. I want to end off with the Honourable Chief Whip of the Opposition, the Honourable Lekker. And the first thing I want to say to her is, again, our vision, our values. And when I say our vision and our values, it's obviously us as a government, and we really want to work with values as a government. We would love the Parliament and the members of this Parliament to also have these values, because we need to make sure that across society we start to work on values as society. Safety and crime is a big issue for us in this province. And if you really think about safety and you look at the balance between values and safety, when your values start to diminish, that's when your crime starts to increase. And if we can start to change values in society, get society to take on different responsibilities and integrity, etc., in their values, we start to change things. And I put that challenge to the Honourable Member. And I say that because the Honourable Member reacts to the State of the Province address in the public domain she wrote an article. And I hope she stands by the words that she wrote in her article with a value set, with integrity. She wrote an article and put it out in the public domain. But then she comes into Parliament, in actual fact, this space where she has protection. She doesn't have protection with what she wrote outside the house. She actually has protection to say what she wants to say inside the house. I know it very well. When I started off in that bench, as I started off the speech, I actually laid a charge with the public protector around possible criminal activity where I had half of the information. I laid the charge at the police station, and that minister who sat in these benches at that stage actually went to jail. And so, in this house, we need to be able to use our privilege, but we also must have integrity when we put things outside to put things inside, and we should have the guts to stand here and say it here as well. We cannot have what we call cookie-cutter allegations. Cookie-cutter allegations. So, on the 25th of February 2013, there was a whole lot of charges laid and a whole lot of fanfare, and the headline read, "Sedition, leading to the death of a child." Basically saying that what you have been doing has actually caused the death of a child. And sedition, a very serious charge. The interesting thing is the charge says, and was laid against the Honourable Theuns Botha. And the headline in the newspaper, when you go and Google it, have a look at the front page of that newspaper, Theuns Botha charged with sedition, wada, 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 wada. On the 25th of February 2013. This is what she writes about. But she doesn't use that charge. She doesn't use that headline. She uses the 22nd of the 2nd, 2019, earlier this year, where the same charges were laid, but it was interesting. They just removed Theuns Botha's name and then put Alan Winde's name. Huh? That's not integrity. That can't be integrity. It cannot be. So, I ask you to make sure that when you make these kind of claims, that you back them up. And we all, and I say that to everyone in this house, because in this house we are all honourable members. And we need to make sure that we treat each other honourably. But where we have evidence, or where we think we have sufficient, we lay charges at the police station, we go to the public protector, and we use this house as a mechanism, because you have protection in this house, to raise these issues. Let's make this parliament work properly. Let's make this parliament work with integrity and with values. Let's make this parliament work in the interests of the people of this province, which in actual fact, in the discussions with the leader of opposition, is exactly what his vision was. And I saw it. I saw it in action in the debate in this house, when someone was making their maiden speech and attacking, in opposition attacking, that the leader of the opposition actually stood up, calmed everything down, laid it out in the line. We don't do that here. That's the kind of parliament that we want in the sixth parliament. Hold each other to account, absolutely strong oversight, and making sure we make a difference. So, Speaker, in conclusion, my vision for this province for the next 5 years is about the 3 points of the triangle: values, responsibility, and safety. We need to make sure as a government that we live our values, build a culture based on these values, continue our relentless work towards building a capable state on this foundation. The responsibility we take to continue delivering opportunities to our people, and we will expect them to take responsibility in improving their own lives with a culture of accountability, playing their part. And safety. We will make this province safer under the rule of law. We will do this however and in whichever way we can. But, Speaker, those 3 values expressed as an idea are just ideas until we give them human form, until we make them real for our people whom we serve. So let us do that for a moment. And, Speaker, let us imagine a woman somewhere in our province who is currently pregnant. My vision for a Western Cape is where she will receive excellent antenatal care. She does this because we recognize the first 1,000 days of a child's life, from conception to the child's 2nd birthday. as a key to health and development. This excellence of delivery will be made possible by our capable state, underpinned by these values. Brought to life, this means that when she needs access to the care that she did access, that it is accessed easily, and that she is treated with respect and with dignity. Speaker, my vision, or our vision as this government, is that when that baby is born, that her mother is responsible and takes advantage of all of the healthcare opportunities provided by this government for her, that her child is immunized, that her child is given every opportunity to be a healthy child. My vision, Speaker, is that when this child is old enough, that her mother will be the responsible person that makes sure that they use the opportunities provided that enroll her in an ECD center, that enroll her then following on in a school, that use every opportunity given to her by this government as she grows up. We also know that that mother in that vision, after dropping her child at the early child development center, can then make use of a transport voucher that this government gives her because she's going to an interview for a job. The opportunity created for her that she's mobile, that she can get there, that she gets to an interview, that she uses the opportunities that were given to her when she was educated to actually get that job. And that by using that job, she then also creates the environment with her responsibility given to her to give that child of hers the best life that that child could possibly have. Speaker, we say this because we need to make sure that this government delivers on this vision with these values, creates these opportunities, that the society out there, the people who we serve, utilize those opportunities, and that this province gets better and better day by day. And Speaker, that is the vision that we all need to make sure that we lead towards, that we play each of us our individual roles in making sure that the constitutional mandate that we were given, that when we stood here and put our hands up and swore allegiance to our Constitution, that we do that with the utmost integrity, with a value system that we all hold dear, in the best interests of making this province the best province that we possibly can. I thank you.
Order, honourable members. Thank you, honourable Premier. That before. Thank you, honourable Murray. Honourable members, order. Order, honourable members. That concludes the Premier's reply to the debate. I'm going to request the honourable members to remain standing for the duration of the procession, and that concludes the debate. The House is adjourned.